Young Boys Incorporated was an extremely organized gang. At the top were 4 shot callers of YBI: Dwayne Wonderful Wayne Davis, Milton Butchjones, Raymond Baby Ray Peoples, and Mark Block Marshall. Ultimately, Butchjones was the most militant of all 4, the leader of the gang after being released from prison. The other 3 leaders were responsible for finding connects on heroin. Milton Butchjones came up around drugs, murder, and violence. The first body he ever caught was as a trigger man hired to do a hit. Ultimately, his environment and poverty inspired him to start Young Boys Incorporated. All members of YBI wanted to escape poverty and supply the best drugs in Detroit. Most of the gangs sourced their work from the Italian mafia, but Butchjones had the idea to acquire dope from different sources such as Golden Triangle and Thailand, so his YBI organization wasn't reliant upon one plug. The name Young Boys Incorporated was like a company. Butchjones organized how the gang moved. In the newspapers, YBI was seen as highly effective due to its structure and unity. Its setup was illustrated as militant by federal authorities. YBI Inner Circle consisted mainly of lieutenants and founders. The lieutenants were responsible for the runners. The runners were, in the case of YBI, oftentimes minors whom were looking to earn money on the side. The strategy of using minors made YBI extremely powerful and difficult to take down. Federal law enforcement in a hearing with members of Congress discussed the success of this tactic. Because most of the members of the organization were minors, efforts to penetrate and dismantle the group met with little success. Many young people in Detroit were attracted to the idea of YBI because it was a quick and easy way to earn money. The youth in YBI were able to afford expensive cars, jewelry, and clothes. They were not afraid to show off their success they were able to have because of their part in the gang. They all dressed in red and white. Red for blood, and white stood for China White, the heroin they sold. Also, Jones bought numerous Corvettes for his main players and members of Young Boys Incorporated, which were Max Julian jackets, which was also known as a Young Boy jacket. They trended newspaper articles throughout the 70s and 80s. The idea of violence, addiction, and death were attached to Young Boys Incorporated by the media. They made headlines due to their flashiness and violence, only making them more appealing and stronger. Kids in Detroit saw YBI as an opportunity to escape poverty. However, not all life with Young Boys Incorporated was about stunting and hustling. It was also about murder, and to enforce respect, Jones organized a crew of ruthless hitters called the Wrecking Crew. Most teenagers in the gang couldn't leave YBI unless they left town, and Butchjones made sure this message was clear to anyone from YBI. It was common to hear competitors of the organization were murdered because Butchjones didn't want YBI to have any competition. But one group of individuals put fear in Jones. Detroit's Drug Enforcement Unit led by Sergeant Rudy Davis. Though Butchjones was no stranger to the system, Sergeant Rudy Davis was a different animal. Davis and his corrupt officers took bribes from YBI rival competitors to extort Butchjones and shake down YBI and rob YBI gang members. Davis was one of many crooked cops in DPD that seized dope, guns, and money, then walked away as if it belonged to him. Eventually, a big indictment surfaced, sending Sergeant Rudy Davis and his fellow corrupt officers to prison. However, Young Boys members and drug sales only grew. At their peak, YBI was clearing $1 million a week and dominated the entire Motown heroin trade. YBI pushed heroin on elementary school playgrounds, using kids as young as 8 and 9 years old to move work on the street. The organization transported most of their drugs and money in taxi cabs. The products of YBI were branded different names, which made them marketable. Jones would test the work with users to confirm the quality of the products. However, it was law in YBI that lieutenants and others in the organization weren't allowed to sample the work. This allowed them to stay sober and attentive to anything happening around them. Overall, YBI functioned similar to any large corporation we see today, with the exception of the product they sold was illegal, and instead of boardroom meetings to settle differences, violence was the method to resolve problems. Furthermore, YBI acquired real estate and more gang members throughout Detroit. Many of the different properties of the organization were on the west side of Detroit, which is where the majority of the city's black population lived at the time. It's possible all of the YBI properties were in one area because of turf wars with other gangs. The properties YBI acquired were low-key and sophisticated enough to avoid police detection. YBI kept drugs and cash in separate locations. Leaders like butchjones and Murray had various properties to store money, so if raided, they had other stash houses with money tucked away that would continue to support their families. But just as it's good times in the game, bad times are destined to be at anyone's front door that chooses to play the game. And when that day comes, you always got to remember what you signed up for. Federal indictments and convictions eventually put Young Boys Incorporated out of business in the 80s. Mountains of financial transactions, informants, and surveillance led to the colossal takedown of YBI associates and leaders such as YBI supplier Sylvester Murray, the largest black heroin dealer in Michigan. Murray not only supplied YBI heroin, but also a fleet of Corvettes through his dealership. The indictment alleged YBI used kids as runners to distribute narcotics, amassing millions in profits. Authorities recovered nearly $2 million in cash and jewelry in the YBI suite. Around 50 of YBI's lieutenants were convicted and sentenced to long prison terms. Butchjones was sentenced but still managed to run YBI from prison. Bush controlled the Young Boys organization through his wife Portia. However, over time, officials realized activity was continuing and obtained a search warrant for Portia Jones' home over murders that had occurred. Portia Jones was indicted for the continuing operations of YBI in 3 homicides. Her husband, Bush Jones, was also indicted for running a criminal enterprise and was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. I appreciate y'all for watching. The channel doing numbers. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment down below. 100.